You've been putting off that thing you're dreaming about. Starting a business or creating more of the art you enjoy. Whatever it might be, there's no shortage of people lining up to tell you that you just need to start. And while that is true, if it were as easy as it is simple, then we'd all be out there pursuing our dreams already. And so it begs the question, how do we start? I asked myself that a couple of months ago, and I tried to find everything that could help me move from that initial spark of something calling to me to a point where I felt like now I'm actually doing it. And so I wrote this essay where I want to unpack 3 sets of simple, but to me deeply transformative actions that you also can take today to finally break the cycle of always waiting and never really getting anywhere. So if you're done waiting like me, then this is for you. So this is where we are right now. It's the spark we feel when we daydream about our project or watch motivational videos online or talk passionately about it late at night with a friend. We have a somewhat vague idea of what it is that we want to create and what it makes us feel like. And over here is the feeling of I'm doing it. And we can be the ones to tell others that they just need to start. Whatever happens in between these 2 states is what we want to understand and then turn into action. So we'll go over how to gain momentum and how we navigate the obstacles we face along the way. But first, I think we have to tackle the problem of being stuck. Starting something new is about walking into the unknown, which is sure to trigger some sort of negative emotion in us. We fear what others will think, or we doubt if we're up for the task, or whatever it might be. So to avoid feeling the negative emotions, we procrastinate to protect ourselves. And in the short term, honestly, that's a perfectly rational strategy. But we've decided that we want to take on the challenge. And so we have to start by bringing whatever we are avoiding into the light, so we may see it and work with it, instead of being driven by whatever is hiding in the background. So as our first step, we write about what we are avoiding by not starting our project. I fear people cringing at my first attempt. I don't want to stand in front of an audience and feel super vulnerable. Or if I don't start, I can't fail and failing hurts. We reflect on which negative emotions or uncomfortable situations we think are related to our project. And then we jot them down on paper to get them out there. The act of writing is something I'll repeatedly return to as a powerful tool in our belt. And I strongly recommend that you use pen and paper, but whatever you do, please don't just make this a mental exercise. It is when we force ourselves to transform our thoughts into words that the magic happens. And we won't get that from just working inside our own head. Anyway, the goal here is not to get rid of the negative emotions. Rather, it is about noticing them in the first place, which empowers us to practice overcoming them instead of pulling out our phone to distract ourselves. And I know it sounds simple, but we need to see the hidden roadblocks so we can plot a course around them instead of looping back to where we came from. So, in short, we reflect and write about what we are avoiding to understand the negative emotions stopping us from doing what we want. The simple act of noticing when it happens will set us up to break free from defaulting back to where we already are. So now that we have a better grasp on what might be holding us back, we also need to turn our attention up, out, and forward. And so what we want to do is to describe our vision in vivid detail. And I really want to emphasize vivid detail here. Exactly what is it that we want to create? And what does it feel, sound, and look like in the theater of the mind? It's not enough to say, I want to make a movie. Instead, we have to ask ourselves questions like, what emotions does the opening scene evoke? What music plays at the big moment? What scene will the audience never forget? The goal here is to sort of begin unfolding a feeling. So that's the spark we talked a little bit about earlier. And translating that into tangible images, sounds, colors, or words that we can work with. The Italian sculptor and artist Michelangelo, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name here, but he's commonly attributed to have said something along the lines of, the sculpture is already in the marble, I just have to chisel away. And it's this way of vividly seeing the vision in the marble that should be true for our project as well. The clearer our vision, the more powerful an effect it will also have on us. And I can't exactly say what it is, but once we have defined this, it's like our subconscious is constantly filtering our thoughts through our vision. And we'll start getting ideas and see connections which will help us gain momentum. And naturally, the uplifting energy of our vision will give meaning to the negative emotions we are also sure to experience in the process of creating something ambitious. So, to summarize, we describe our vision by vividly imagining the details of what we want to create and get the satisfying inner images and feelings out of our heads and down on paper. This is going to excite us and pull us toward it, but we might also feel quite a bit of anxiety when thinking about all that it will take, practically speaking, to realize our ambition from where we are right now. And that's perfectly normal, and something we'll get back to later. So now that we have something to aspire to, we have to talk about sacrifice. And I know it's not the most exciting thing to talk about, but you and I both know that we're not going to attain something without giving up something else. If we're not specific about what's most important to us, it's going to indirectly feel like everything is equally important. If our career, personal goals, hobbies, partying, traveling, or whatever your life consists of, if it's all fixed, then surely we are stuck in a gridlock. And the reason why sacrifice isn't super exciting is because it usually involves a small amount of negative emotion to give up something. But we also want to realize that letting go of something is also liberating. And that's a lot more exciting. So, the next step for us is to define what we are willing to sacrifice. And it may help us to think in terms of what we're currently spending our time, money, and attention on. If we spend an hour scrolling on Instagram each day, it's worth considering if that's more important than working on our thing. And yeah, sure, that's likely an easy one to answer. But what about comparing it to the time we spend playing video games each day with our friends? Is that more important? Or maybe we have a high status, high paying job in a career we would like to see advance. Is that up for negotiation? And finally, I think it's also important that we reflect on what we're not willing to sacrifice, like being able to pay the rent or time with our family or our mental health. If we don't know where to start, we can start by writing down all of the current life goals and ambitions we have. I want to be promoted at work, start my own business, kick ass in Counter-Strike, deadlift my body weight, or buy an apartment. Whatever it might be. And then we physically cross them out on paper until we have the one or two most important ones left. And this part of physically crossing something out and deciding not to prioritize it or pursue it, at least not for the moment, that is the painful part. But we don't have to think of it in binary terms. It's not like I'm saying we either quit the job or the dream that we have. But what we're trying to do here is to take the pressure off ourselves a little bit, become a little more flexible and focused by letting go of all the things we could do, and at least get a sense of what matters most. So we define what goals and habits we are willing to sacrifice to free ourselves from trying to be, achieve, and engage with everything at once. Up until this point, we've reflected on both negative and positive emotions, and we're beginning to form excitement, but likely also a bit of fear and doubt and anxiety in our mind. Facing and managing what goes on inside us is a difficult skill to master, and one that is really best developed together with a professional. But based on my personal experience, there is one important action we can practice that I don't want to leave out, after experiencing again and again the difference it makes for me. We talk to someone, but not anyone, to get out of the world we build in our minds. Walled off in our own head, it's like fear, anxiety, and doubt. It can sort of echo around inside, and that's going to amplify the effect. The act of putting it into words together with someone we trust is going to feel like opening up the mind to reduce the echo we feel on the inside. The feelings will most likely still be there, but it will also take some power out of them and make them more manageable so we can move forward. The other person will deeply appreciate us for including them in something that is important to us, just like how we would feel if they came to us. Allowing someone to share an experience like this is arguably one of the most underrated gifts we can give each other in a close relation. However, before we speed dial all of our friends, we have to consider the following. It has to be someone that we trust and someone who can listen as we stumble our way through something that is still new to us. And I think it's very likely that one special person already popped up in your mind, but naturally it could be your best friend or your partner or one of your siblings. We ask them to listen without trying to solve our problems. And the way that they help us is by allowing us to get out of our minds, at least for a moment. It's the act of talking that frees us, not the input from the outside. And finally, we don't want to make it a conversation about our inspiring vision, although it might be really tempting. This is too soon, and also not really the thing holding us back. But we'll talk more about that later. So, for now, we reach out to someone, but not anyone, to talk about the negative emotions we experience by trying to get started. This practice will make whatever is holding us back more manageable. The goal so far has been to pull up the anchor to free our ship so we can actually start moving forward. And so you could say that now is the time to catch some wind in the sails and actually start building momentum. The vision that we have described in vivid detail is a long-term goal that will fill us with excitement and inspiration and creativity. But it's also likely going to create a feeling of anxiety and overwhelm when considering what it will take. On the other hand, the practical actions that we can take to reach our vision are short term goals that fill us with focus and clarity, but they are also likely to cause frustration and impatience. So, the skill that we want to practice is the ability to nudge ourselves gently between the two states. When we feel anxiety and overwhelm, we refocus on what's directly in front of us. And when we feel frustration and impatience, we try to recall our vision and reignite the excitement and the inspiration. So, to begin with, we write down all of the things that we can think of right now that has to happen from where we are until we have our vision realized. And to get that started, we can think in terms of things we have to do, or things we want to achieve, or problems that we think we have to solve. So without moving on to problem solving or planning, we just empty our heads of everything we can think of. I need to publish my first post, secure an investor, understand the tax laws, find a great cupcake recipe, or whatever it might be. It doesn't have to form the complete picture. We can always come back and do this again later, but getting a sense of the smaller victories that we can celebrate along the way is the first push of wind in our sails. And then we come to the point where we would usually be advised to make a plan. But if we take a step back, is that really what we need right now? If you've ever worked in a large organization, you will know about the countless hours spent trying to control the outcome of reality with detailed planning, timelines, deadlines, and so on. We put a lot of well-meaning energy into our plans, but reality will rarely be tamed by smart people. As Oliver Bergman suggests, a plan is only a statement of intent. It's not like it's a magical lasso we throw at the future to reel in the vision that we have. So instead, we take a lighter approach. We narrow our field of view to focus on what's directly in front of us and define one or maybe two, three simple things we can work on today. Then, looking at the list of things we explored before, we move one of them to the next week, maybe a few to the next month, and those far away from where we are right now to the next year. And for now, this is all we need. A roughly sketched map of the path we think is up the mountain, with the next few steps clearly defined. The purpose of this is only ever to gain momentum by understanding what we can do right now to move us closer to what we want. And second, it's also how we, at least partly, manage the anxiety of doing something ambitious by knowing what we don't have to worry about today. The final thing we will do to give us momentum is to schedule time to work on our project. We all have different lives, and how much time we have is a very individual thing, but regardless if it's daily or just a few hours a week, it will help us immensely if it's not just when we feel like it, but rather at recurring times where we dedicate ourselves to it. This will also make it easier to say no when something else pops up. We plan time so we will enjoy our days, and we don't fall into the trap of thinking that we have to go all in at the expense of everything else. This whole Sigma grindset mentality from hustle culture, we know it will wear us down and kill our ability to be creative problem solvers. It's going to be our daily and weekly dedication over time that compounds to create something that no one else had the patience to do. So finally, We schedule time to work on our project, but also leave some time to enjoy the other parts of our lives. Because we understand that this is how we sustain the resolve required to create something ambitious. So, coming back to that ship analogy I used earlier, we now have our sails full of wind and momentum on our side, and it's beginning to feel like we're finally moving towards our vision. But every journey, no matter how well prepared, comes with its share of challenges. So, finally, we shift our attention to navigation and we ask, how might we help ourselves to stay on course and avoid being stuck again? As with so many things, it starts with attention. So, to begin with, we reflect and write about the habits that might distract us from reaching our destination. We can ease into it by reflecting on questions like, what do I usually do when I come home from work? How do I spend my Sundays? Or when I don't have any plans, what do I end up doing? And during this process, we might already find some habits that isn't really moving us anywhere, at least not closer to our dream, like binging Netflix or browsing new furniture online. It's like we stumble upon a small hole in our day and we just fill it with something. But where it gets really interesting is when we pay attention to the passive habits we have formed to numb ourselves when we feel some sort of discomfort. It's when we don't immediately know how to answer an email, and so we begin checking the other emails. It's when we feel restless on the toilet and we pull out our phone to doom scroll. Or it's when we feel anxious about an upcoming exam and end up playing video games all day to distract ourselves. Now, we don't want to be hard on ourselves for having these habits. Numbing ourselves from discomfort is not completely irrational to do. But by reflecting and seeing the patterns in our own behavior, we enable ourselves to notice when we're about to pull out the phone and decide to practice staying with what's difficult in front of us. Changing habits is hard and a science on its own, really, but ignore all of that now and just focus on the core practice here. We reflect and we write about the habits that distracts us and prevents us from getting what we want. Knowing this, we can notice when it happens and practice overcoming. Just like in the gym, every rep counts, and we can celebrate each time we catch ourselves, because this is what progress looks like. Beyond habits, obstacles will come in many forms: lack of motivation, money, time, fear, and so on. But instead of seeing them as showstoppers for the path we're charting, we make a point out of seeing them as part of the process. You could say that we move them to the top of the to-do list for our project. And this shift in perspective will massively transform our view on what it means to work toward our vision. There is no universal rulebook out there that dictates what counts as working towards our dream. No external judge keeping score of what is real progress and what is not. Instead, we get to decide. A fear of public speaking can either be the reason why it's impossible to become a stand-up comedian or simply the first step on the journey. So we move obstacles to the top of the to-do list instead of being defeated. And now let's go back to why we don't want to tell the world about our vision. Where we are, our vision is just a small seedling, and we don't want to expose it to the critique of the broader group yet. It's not that we expect the world to work against us, but we recognize that the nature of groups is towards conformity. Well-meaning feedback like, have you thought of, or are you sure about, it can potentially cause more harm than good at this stage where we are at. So instead, we see our vision as a reserve of positive, uplifting energy that we keep inside ourselves. If a good friend asks, we allow ourselves to be vague or outright say that we're trying to hold on to that energy for now. We don't prematurely cash in on the small dopamine hit we get when we talk about being a business owner or professional comedian or whatever our dream is. So we protect our dream and our vision by keeping it on the inside for now, and we use that energy to propel us forward. The final thing in the navigation toolbox is a map that we can take out when we feel stuck or lost. There will come a time when we need either a small boost or maybe all hope seems to be out. So we send a helping hand from the present to our future selves by creating something to lean on during the journey. We know that the spark we feel now we can always find again. So we make it a note on our phone, or we write it out on a piece of paper and plaster it on the home office wall. It doesn't really matter how we do it, but somewhere we have created something that will pull us out of the mud and get us back on track. And different things will work for each of us, so we can really make it personal. But here's some pointers. So we need something to remind ourselves of our vision. And for me, this is rereading what I wrote about the everyday that I want to create. We need something to justify the discomfort of struggling. For me, this is reminding myself that when I'm struggling, that is exactly the feeling that I'm looking for. And it's now that I have a chance to grow. And we need something that can snap us out of the world that we've built in our minds. And for me, this is forcing myself to call my best friend or bounce some ideas off my partner while we cook in the kitchen. And finally, we need to remind ourselves of the truth in just start, because it is true. No matter where we end up, we can always just start again.